these are your notes on chromosomes. So before we move forward with cell division, I want to just briefly touch on some vocab and some terminology that we are going to look at when we look at mitosis and meiosis. So our question here is, what are chromosomes? And we alluded to this in the cell cycle lab, but we want to come back to that question, or just what exactly are chromosomes and how are they structured? So if we look at DNA and how they're arranged, DNA is just arranged. You have all this DNA in your cells, and I think I spoke about this in the last activity about just the sheer amount of DNA in your body that you could go to the moon and back if we literally stretched everything out from every cell in your body. But in every cell, it's actually arranged, and it's arranged in little tiny bundles called chromosomes. And if you look at a chromosome, that piece of DNA is held together by what's called a centromere. And if we look at just sort of the shape of it, here's an example of one single chromosome, and then in the middle there it's the centromere. And on that DNA you have specific traits or specific genes that code for different traits. All right, so just chromosomes are just sections of DNA that are organized in little bundles like this, where there are smaller parts on the chromosome that code for traits. So if we look at how it's arranged, so DNA can replicate and copy itself, and of course this happens in the S phase of the cell cycle. And if we want to, of course, make a new cell, everything has to be copied first before we split it in two. So one of the things that happens is that DNA has to copy itself. DNA is the instructions for life, so that DNA has to copy. So when these chromosomes copy, they make what are called sister chromatids. So we have a chromosome here and the copied here. Here's the sister chromatid held together by a little button, the centromere. Again, one centromere for one chromosome. So if we look at this picture here, I want you to think to yourself, what is this actually showing? And to the left here, we have a picture of a single chromosome. And there's the centromere. And over here, we have sister chromatids. So if this over here wanted to copy itself, this picture right here would show the copied version. And of course, these would be kind of closer together, held together by that button, the centromere. So sister chromatids. It's still one chromosome, we just have sister chromatids. And if we look at how we get the DNA, because here comes a number count. When you're looking at correct ways for cells to reproduce and ensuring the fact that each new cell has the right stuff and the right amount of DNA, it really comes down to a numbers thing. So we have to understand that for organisms that sexually reproduce, half of the DNA comes from mom and half comes from the father. If too little or too much come from each side, then it's gonna sort of mess up the count. So we count these in terms of chromosomes. So chromosomes are like socks. All right, if you have a pair of socks, that equals two socks. If you're missing one, then that doesn't do you any good. So just think of it like that. Chromosomes have a pair. You get one from mom, one from dad, and if you're missing one, that's an issue. Okay, so the number of chromosomes is even because you get, of course, a chromosome from each parent. Your mom's chromosomes match with your dad's chromosomes, making what's called a homologous pair. And again, those chromosomes are identical in the fact that where the genes are located are similar, right? You might have different genes. You might have a different gene from mom and dad, but where the gene is located on the chromosome is specific. And we'll talk more about that in genetics. So what is, again, this idea of a homologous pair? It's a pair of chromosomes. You get one from mom and one from dad. They have the same type of gene at the same spot. And when you're looking at how you might visually represent that, sometimes they're represented like this. You still have a homologous pair of chromosomes. So we understand that replication does happen. So if you're in the S phase where your chromosomes are replicating, our homologous pairs might look like this down here. Same thing. Again, you have sister chromatids. It's one chromosome, just sister chromatids. So it just is a matter of if you're looking at pictures of chromosomes in cells, your homologous pairs are either going to look like this first picture or they're going to look like this second picture. All right, it just depends on, again, where you're looking at the cell and cell cycle. So how much DNA is in a human nucleus? And we have to understand, again, one set has all the DNA from a parent, because in all living things that sexually reproduce, you have two parents, a mom and a dad, right? So technically you have two sets of chromosomes, one from mom, one from dad, just like a pair of socks, okay? You have two socks, and just imagine that you get one sock from each parent. And again, it's important because in science we count the chromosome to make sure and to ensure that these new cells are dividing correctly. So how much DNA is in a nucleus? We have 46 total chromosomes in humans. I mean, every organism is a little different. But if we have one set, which the term we use for one set is haploid, or N, that's 23 chromosomes. If we have two sets, that's diploid, and 2N, or 46 chromosomes. Again, 46 total, you get 23 from each parent. Okay, if you get 22 from one parent, then that throws the number off, and you're missing some genetic information. That's bad. Okay, that can lead to a lot of different genetic disorders. But the terms we use to describe the sets themselves are haploid and diploid. Okay, so haploid is one set, diploid is two. And easy way to remember that, haploid means half. So we have 46 total, right? So haploid is half of that, 23. You get half from mom, half from dad. Diploid means di, meaning two, which is why we have that 2 in there. So 46 chromosomes, okay? So all organisms are a little different based on the number of chromosomes they have. For instance, you see a koala bear has 7, potatoes have 24, chickens have 36. And the closer you are in relation to that organism, probably the closer the amount of chromosomes that you have. And that may or may not be true for some, but if you're looking at species like us and, let's say, apes, you know, we're pretty similar. So what are two types of cells? So backing up, we have to think. We have chromosomes, right? We have chromosomes and sister chromatids, right? And we need to think about, well, where do we find those in the types of cells? So we have overall two types of cells in our body. We have gametes, which are our sex cells, and we have somatic cells, which are considered a body. And I believe we did this at the beginning of the cell cycle lab. Again, gametes, egg and sperm, somatic cell, everything else. So in men, if it's not a sperm cell, then it's considered a body cell. In women, if it's not an egg, it is a body cell. I'm sorry. So again, it's so important when it comes to getting the correct number. So we can assume that every gamete has half the amount of genetic information. So every egg in a human has 23 chromosomes. Every sperm in a human has 23 chromosomes. You put them together when fertilization occurs, and then you have 46. So that's perfect, okay? If we deviate from that number, if division doesn't happen correctly, then that's going to be a major issue, okay? Again, if it wasn't half the chromosomes, then we're not going to get correct multiplying. So again, if just imagine right here where you had your cells being diploid, that would be too many chromosomes, right? Wouldn't happen. Let's imagine down here that, again, you copied too many. When you make your gametes, each gamete has to donate at least half in order to get the total. Okay, very, very important that happens. And again, just keep in mind that when we say fertilization, we are actually, when the haploid gametes combine, they form a diploid zygote. So 23 and 23 give you 46. I also want to note here, not only are there two types of cells, gametes or body cells, there's also two types of chromosomes. So, and we'll take a look at this when we really look at pictures of chromosomes later on in the unit. But you have to understand too that there are out of your 46 chromosomes, there are 2 that identify what gender you are. And those that don't, which would be 44, they determine all your other traits. Okay, so those are called autosomes, not AutoZone, like the car store, but autosome, SOME. And then the remaining two determine your gender. Those are called your gender chromosomes. So here are your notes. Please put them in your folder.